Big mistake. When the HOA declared my lakefront property community land, they didn't expect a national surf event to hit them like a tidal wave. This isn't just a story about property, it's about what happens when you stand your ground and turn their power grab into a public spectacle. Let's begin the story. The first thing Logan Pierce noticed wasn't the morning sun cresting over the pines or the loons calling across the lake. No, it was the hammer-sharp, angry thuds piercing the still air like gunshots. Bleary-eyed, Logan stumbled out onto his deck, coffee sloshing from his mug and staining his favorite t-shirt. And then he saw her. Karen from the HOA, standing proudly at the edge of his private lakeside beach, a monstrous wooden sign clutched in her manicured hands. Bold, ugly letters screamed, "Community Lake Access HOA Property." Behind her, a grim battalion of HOA volunteers, armed with clipboards and smug expressions, were hammering posts into the sand. His private beach. Logan blinked hard, praying he was still trapped in some caffeine-starved nightmare. But no, Karen spotted him, adjusted her enormous sun hat, and gave a sickeningly sweet wave. Before he could even ask what the hell was happening, she raised a megaphone to her lips and bellowed. Today marks a new era of community spirit. As voted by your HOA, this lakeshore now belongs to the people. The words hit Logan like a slap. His mouth dropped open, the coffee cup slipped from his fingers, and he watched it plummet onto the deck, shattering against the wood with a finality that mirrored the sudden unraveling of his peaceful life. Fueled by disbelief, Logan stormed down the steps barefoot, dodging pamphlets thrust at him by grinning volunteers. The flyers read shared waters, shared dreams. It would have been hilarious if it wasn't so psychotic. Karen, standing like a self-declared queen before her freshly planted sign, blocked his path with her clipboard clutched defensively to her chest. "You're trespassing now, Mr. Pierce," she chirped smugly. "The HOA voted unanimously. This land is now a public trust zone." Logan stared at her, heart pounding with a mixture of rage and astonishment. His voice came out cold and measured. "Would you like to see my deed?" Karen recoiled as if he had offered her a dead rat. Wrinkling her nose, she sniffed. Community enrichment is more important than outdated paperwork. The absurdity was staggering, but Logan didn't waste words. He pivoted on his heel, marched back into his cabin, and ripped the framed deed off his office wall, a legal document with a heavy wax seal and decades-old signatures, and returned to the lakeshore. Karen peered at the document like it was written in a foreign language, then, without missing a beat, barked to the crowd. "Ownership is irrelevant when the greater good demands sacrifice. Greed has no place at Silverwood Lake." Greed. That was the word that finally made Logan's blood boil. Owning what you paid for, fought for, and built with your own hands was now greed. The lake sparkled mockingly behind Karen, its waters no longer a peaceful refuge but a battleground. And deep down, Logan knew, this wasn't going to end with signs and hammers. No, this was only the beginning. The hammering stopped by noon, but the damage was only just beginning. By the time Logan returned from town after a pitiful attempt to clear his head with a coffee that tasted like ash, found a full-scale invasion on his lakeshore. Colorful banners whipped in the breeze, Silverwood Shores for all, and greedy landlords. Picnic tables had been hauled down by enthusiastic volunteers. Children he had never seen before splashed in the shallows, their parents nodding approvingly at Karen, who was parading up and down the beach like a conquering general. When Logan tried to cross his own sand, Karen intercepted him with two burly HOA members at her side. She slapped a pamphlet into his chest so hard it crumpled. "You can still join us," she said in a syrupy tone, "if you apologize publicly and donate the land formally to the community trust. We might consider naming a bench after you." The crowd tittered. Logan didn't answer. He didn't trust himself to speak without unleashing a tidal wave of fury that would only make him look like the monster Karen clearly wanted him to be. That evening, the true onslaught began. As the sun sank over Silverwood Lake, Logan's phone buzzed nonstop. Texts from neighbors, some curious, some cold-blooded, and social media posts circulated like wildfire. Local beach hog refuses to share. Selfish property owner hates families. Karen had even crafted a glossy post on the HOA's website complete with photos of Logan's deck, captioned, "This luxury beach has been selfishly hoarded for years, no more." At midnight, as Logan sat on his porch staring into the dark water, headlights swung into his driveway. Two figures stumbled out, a pair of HOA board members he vaguely recognized, and crept toward the beach carrying strange, lumpy objects. Logan, silent in the shadows, filmed the whole pathetic spectacle on his phone. They installed hidden security cameras disguised as fake rocks. They hammered "No Trespassing, Owner Subject to Arrest" signs facing his house. They were trying to build a fake narrative that Logan was the trespasser now, not the victim. He stifled a bitter laugh. They weren't just stealing his property, they were rewriting reality itself. The cold rage that had been simmering all day crystallized into something sharper, more dangerous. This wasn't just about a patch of sand anymore. Karen wanted to erase him, humiliate him, destroy him. And if they thought Logan Pierce was going to roll over and let them, they had just made the biggest mistake of their lives. The stillness of the lake whispered promises of war, and Logan, alone under the stars, made a silent vow. If they wanted a battle, they were damn well going to get one. By morning, Logan had barely slept. The sun hadn't even touched the tops of the pine trees when he sat on his porch, mug in hand, staring out at the now occupied beach like it was enemy territory. His own land, his sanctuary defiled by HOA propaganda, folding chairs, and smug smiles. Karen had been busy. Overnight, she launched a full-on recruitment campaign. Flyers littered the driveways. A new Facebook group titled "Reclaim Silverwood Shores" popped up, already filled with virtue-signaling comments, stock photos of lakeside sunsets, and phrases like communal harmony and fighting elitism. Logan's name was being dragged through the digital mud, framed as some out-of-touch recluse who wanted to deprive children of joy. The final straw. A child's crayon drawing taped to his mailbox. It showed a devil horn-stick figure holding a pitchfork on the beach, with a caption, "Stop the beach hog." Logan's jaw tightened, his eyes burned, but not from fatigue. He could go to court. He could call the sheriff. He could sue every last member of that whole board into oblivion. But Karen wanted that. She wanted him tangled up in red tape while she kept spreading her lies. She'd already weaponized the slow wheels of local bureaucracy. If he was going to win, it couldn't just be legal. It had to be spectacular. And that's when it hit him like a lightning strike of pure brilliance. He grabbed his phone and scrolled down to a name he hadn't called in years, Duke Bishop. College buddy, former pro surfer, now the president of the Mountain State Surfing Federation, and a man who owed Logan more than a few favors. Logan's fingers hovered for only a second before he hit call. "Dude," Duke answered instantly, voice already full of curiosity. "It's been, 10 years? What's up?" Logan didn't hesitate. He laid it all out. Karen, the HOA, the property theft, the public shaming, the cameras, the fake signs, the devil horn flyers. By then, Duke was howling. "You're telling me this woman thinks she can steal your land and turn you into the villain? Oh no, 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 no." Logan's voice dropped to a near whisper, charged with barely contained excitement. "How fast can you throw together a regional qualifier?" There was a pause. Then Duke's laugh came back twice as loud. "Dude, you are insane. I love it. I'll make some calls. Sponsors, vendors, pros. Let's blow this thing up." Logan leaned back in his chair, eyes locked on the shoreline. The lake shimmered with possibility. This wasn't going to be a legal scuffle. This was going to be a spectacle. If they wanted a community beach so badly, Logan was about to give them one they'd never forget. And when it was over, Karen would wish she'd never stepped foot in Silverwood. The next morning, the first sign that something big was coming wasn't the rumble of trucks or the excited chatter of early bird spectators. It was the black SUV with surfboards strapped to the roof that rolled down the winding hill into Silverwood. Then another, and another. By noon, Logan's quiet lakeside cabin had become the epicenter of a logistical whirlwind. Massive trailers backed into the gravel shoulder of his private drive. Workers in neon safety vests poured out, hauling metal scaffolding, portable stages, vendor tents, and stacks of foldable bleachers. Loudspeakers were unloaded. Flags emblazoned with energy drink logos whipped in the breeze. Logan stood at the edge of his deck, coffee in hand, watching the chaos unfold with the most satisfied smile he'd worn in weeks. Duke had delivered. And not halfway. He'd gone nuclear. This wasn't just a regional surf event. It was a full-blown national qualifier with major sponsors, celebrity appearances, and a broadcast team from a sports streaming service already setting up their mobile studio van by the boathouse. By mid-afternoon, the town buzzed with rumors. Logan heard snippets at the gas station, at the bakery, at the hardware store. Is that Kelly Marsh I saw unloading her board? Did you hear Logan's got permits for a whole weekend? The HOA is gonna flip out. They weren't wrong. At precisely 3:12 p.m., Karen arrived. Flanked by her two most loyal foot soldiers Brenda and Carl stomped across the beach in a fury, clipboard tucked under one arm like a shield. A fluorescent safety vest with HOA enforcement scribbled in Sharpie across the front. Her face turned a dangerous shade of plum when she saw the tents going up. "WHAT is all this?" Logan turned, utterly calm, and greeted her with a nod. "Just a small private event, fully permitted. Would you like to see the paperwork?" Karen snapped her fingers. "This is a violation. You didn't get approval from the HOA." Logan's grin widened as he pulled out a thick folder and handed it to her. "Permits from the county, from the State Parks Department, noise ordinance waivers, traffic control clearances, vendor food safety certifications, environmental impact statements. Every last one, signed, stamped, and bulletproof." Karen flipped through the documents like they were written in another language. Her hand trembled slightly as she tried to formulate a response, but there wasn't one. She was outmaneuvered, outflanked, humiliated. Without another word, she turned on her heel and stormed off the beach. Logan watched her go, the weight of weeks of frustration finally starting to lift. The battle wasn't over, not by a long shot, but the tide had turned. By sundown, the first stage lights blinked to life. Duke's crew tested sound equipment, vendors lit grills, families walked by, eyes wide at the spectacle forming in their backyard. And just across the lake, Karen stood at the edge of her dock, watching it all unfold. Logan didn't wave, but he did smile. Because the circus had just come to town and she'd handed him the spotlight. The next morning, Silverwood Lake was electric. Word had spread like wildfire overnight. Locals who had never touched a surfboard gathered at the water's edge, phones in hand, eager to catch a glimpse of the action. Food trucks lined the old park road. Kids ran barefoot across the grass. And in the heart of it all, Logan watched from his porch, arms crossed and satisfied, as the beach he'd fought to protect came alive with music, laughter, and motion. But not everyone was smiling. At 8:07 a.m., just as the first heat of the competition hit the water, Karen made her grand return. She was dressed like a fluorescent traffic Canadian vest, bright orange sun hat, aviator sunglasses, and a laminated badge that read, "Community Watch Commander Silverwood HOA." Trailing behind her were a sad-looking trio of HOA diehards, clutching flimsy protest signs that flapped limply in the breeze. "Shut it down," she shrieked, marching toward the main gate of the event. She tried to block a teenage surfer carrying his board, but the kid casually sidestepped her, barely giving her a glance. Frustrated, Karen turned to another group of spectators, but the grass had been watered that morning, and her sandal caught a slick patch. She slipped and landed face first into the sand beside a half-built child sandcastle. A collective gasp rippled across the beach. Then a burst of laughter. Someone shouted, "Oh, wipe out!" Phones rose, cameras flashed, and nearby news crew caught it all in glorious high definition. Within minutes, the video hit social media under the tag Karen Splashdown. Red-faced and sputtering, Karen scrambled to her feet, but her protest was unraveling faster than her composure. Even Brenda and Carl looked like they regretted showing up. She tried to rally them. No one listened. The band on stage even slipped in a surf rock version of the Jaws theme when she walked by. Logan watched the spectacle unfold from the judge's booth with a lemonade in hand. But beneath his amusement, he sensed something darker brewing. That afternoon, Mr. Jenkins, a quiet, mostly invisible member of the whole board, flagged Logan down behind the main tent. The man looked nervous, constantly glancing over his shoulder. "She's not done," he whispered. "Karen's organizing a blockade." Logan's eyebrows lifted. "A what?" She called in a few contractors, said they were concerned citizens. "They're coming with equipment, big stuff." Said she was gonna shut down the event before the youth get corrupted by surf culture. Her words, not mine. Logan's stomach turned in it with fear, but with cold calculation. She was escalating. Again. Only this time, she was doing it with bulldozers. He thanked Jenkins, then immediately got on the phone with Duke and the security team. Duke's laugh on the other end sounded more amused than surprised. Karen's trying to shut down a nationally permitted surf comp with a backhoe. Oh man, that's rich. But they didn't laugh for long. Logan knew this had to be handled right. Legally, publicly, and forgettably. Because if Karen thought she could weaponize chaos to win, she had no idea the storm she was about to unleash on herself. The rumble echoed through the pines before the machines even crested the ridge. Logan stood near the entrance to his lakeside property, watching as a parade of heavy equipment, a bulldozers, a cement mixer, and a yellow crane rolled slowly down the county road. It looked like the start of a demolition job, not the continuation of a surf competition. Behind the wheel of the lead bulldozer sat a confused-looking contractor, and standing triumphantly off to the side, arms crossed, chin raised, was Karen. She was grinning like a woman who thought she had just played the winning card. Due to safety concerns and environmental hazards, she declared to a small group of onlookers, "We're closing off access to the water immediately." The drivers hesitated, unsure whether to proceed. Karen shouted at them, "Go, it's for the community." Logan was already in motion. He approached the lead truck calmly, flashing a document like a badge. "This is private property. These machines are here without permits. That's trespassing." The contractor furrowed his brow. Karen said the HOA owns the shoreline. Logan handed him a copy of his deed. The HOA lied. A tense moment passed. Then the radios on the contractor's belts crackled. Logan's security team had already notified local law enforcement. Within minutes, sheriff's deputies rolled in, lights flashing, dust billowing behind their cruisers. They stepped out of their vehicles with citation pads already open. One spoke to the foreman. Another took Karen aside. She was mid-rant when one deputy cut her off. "Ma'am, you're interfering with a permitted event on private land. These vehicles were deployed under false pretenses. This is obstruction." Karen's mouth opened and closed, her hands trembling around her clipboard. "But the community doesn't override property law," the deputy said flatly. "You're lucky we're not hauling these machines away." The contractors, realizing they'd been duped into a legal mess, angrily turned on Karen. "We're billing you for this," one shouted as he climbed back into his cab. "You lied to us." They peeled out one by one, engines roaring, leaving Karen standing alone in a swirl of dust and defeat. The crowd that had gathered around Logan's property gate erupted, not in anger, but in laughter. Cameras rolled. A live stream began trending under cement Karen. And just like that, the narrative shifted. No longer was Logan the greedy beach hog. He was the level-headed, law-abiding underdog defending his land from a power-mad HOA president who had just tried to use construction equipment to block children from watching a surf competition. The festival exploded with energy after that. Vendors ran out of food. Local shops reported record profits. A family-owned hotel down the road posted a sign. "Welcome surf fans, thank you, Logan." Karen, meanwhile, retreated to her house. Rumors swirled that she was trying to file an emergency injunction. But Logan had already anticipated that too. The permits were ironclad, the legal ground solid, the crowd completely on his side now. And as the sun dipped behind the mountain ridge that night, casting Silverwood Lake in molten gold, Logan knew one thing for sure. Karen had just lost the war. By the time the sun rose over Silverwood the next day, the beach had become a legend. Locals flooded in with lawn chairs and sunglasses, waving to Logan like he was a celebrity. Vendors refilled stock. Reporters returned not to cover chaos, but celebration. Kids built sand castles next to professional surfers. Music floated through the pine-filtered breeze. And Karen was nowhere to be seen. Logan figured she was licking her wounds, but even he couldn't have predicted what would happen next. Late that afternoon, as he scrolled through his phone while sipping cold brew on his porch, a notification pinged. "Breaking investigative report exposes HOA land grab scheme." He clicked the article and nearly dropped his drink. A local journalist had followed the trail of paperwork, anonymous tips, and a leaked email chain that told a story far more sinister than petty clipboard power. Karen's beach crusade had never been about community enrichment. Not really. She and a small group of board members had been working behind the scenes for months to claim Logan's beach through eminent communal interest. The ultimate goal: to lease the land to a private developer planning a luxury lakefront condo project. Worse still, Karen had signed a preliminary agreement offering the developer first rights of refusal contingent on the HOA successfully reclaiming the land. The story hit Silverwood like a thunderclap. By sunset, Every phone in town was buzzing. Neighbors who had once parroted Karen's slogans were now livid, realizing they'd been used. Those who had remained neutral now rallied behind Logan. Even members of the HOA board, not part of Karen's inner circle, began publicly distancing themselves, issuing statements of shock and demanding an emergency session. That night, Logan watched from his deck as residents taped flyers to telephone poles and mailbox posts. Emergency whole meeting, demand accountability, remove Karen now. Logan didn't even have to say a word. The town was doing it for him. The meeting the next evening was standing room only. The community center buzzed with righteous anger. Residents shouted over each other. People waved printed emails. Photos of the developer's visits to the neighborhood were displayed on a projector. Karen stood in the front, clipboard shaking in her hands, eyes wild. "It was a misunderstanding," she stammered. I mean, the condos would have raised property values." Someone in the back yelled, "You lied to us." Another shouted, "You sold us out." The final blow came from Mr. Jenkins, quiet man with the slumped shoulders who had always seemed invisible at meetings. He stepped forward, held up a signed HOA document, and read aloud Karen's official memo promising private board compensation for facilitating the developer deal. Gasps filled the room. Karen sank into her chair, eyes glazed over. When the vote was called, the result wasn't even close. She was removed instantly, barred from future board positions, and, as one neighbor suggested, possibly facing civil liability. As the room emptied, Logan lingered at the door. Karen passed him, silent, her shoulders hunched, her eyes hollow. The once unshakable queen of Silverwood now reduced to nothing more than a cautionary tale. And Logan, he didn't gloat, he just watched. Because justice didn't need a victory dance. Sometimes, it just needed the truth. In the days that followed Karen's public collapse, the town of Silverwood transformed almost overnight. Gone were the glares, the whispered judgments, the social media posts calling Logan greedy. Now, neighbors waved from across the road. Strangers knocked on his doornet with complaints, but with heartfelt apologies and homemade pie. One family even left a thank you note scrawled in child's handwriting. "Thank you for fighting for the lake." The HOA, once feared like some petty neighborhood monarchy, had been gutted. Several board members resigned in disgrace, hoping to avoid further scrutiny as the state attorney general's office announced a formal investigation into corruption and abuse of authority. Subpoenas were issued. Emails were seized. Karen, once the iron-fisted queen of community standards, had vanished from public view entirely. Her face was splashed across local news stories and viral meme accounts. She lost her job at a nearby real estate firm. Her husband reportedly filed for divorce, and her pristine lakefront home now bore a line of for sale signs clustered like vultures. The woman who tried to steal Logan's property under the banner of community good had instead united that very community against her. And Logan, he barely recognized the version of Silverwood he now lived in. The beach, once the epicenter of division, had become sacred ground not through ownership or control, but through respect. Families still visited, but now they asked first. Surfers returned in the early morning hours, always leaving it cleaner than they found it. Teenagers picked up trash without being told. Elderly couples strolled hand in hand along the tide line, exchanging quiet hellos and grateful glances with Logan whenever they passed. Even the HOA under interim leadership reached out. They offered formal apologies, invited Logan to help draft new community guidelines, promised transparency, fairness, and above all, respect for private property. To Logan's surprise, he agreed. Not because he trusted them who didn't, but because the town had earned another chance. What Karen had tried to take through force had been returned through unity, and that meant something. One crisp evening, Logan stood at the water's edge, watching as golden light spilled across the lake. Behind him, he could hear the earth sound of neighbors gathered at a small, impromptu potluck organized in celebration of Silverwood's new chapter. He turned just in time to see Mr. Jenkins raise a toast. The old man's voice was firm, clear. "To the one who stood his ground, who reminded us that standing up for yourself can protect more than your rights, it can protect an entire community." The group clapped, some even cheered. Logan gave a small nod, a rare smile tugging at his lips. Karen had tried to crush him. Instead, she had built him a legacy. Weeks passed, but the momentum never faded. What had begun as a desperate act of defiance had blossomed into something far more meaningful, a legacy. The inaugural Silverwood Freedom Surf Festival had drawn crowds from 3 states. Hotels sold out. Local diners posted record sales. The town's hardware store started stocking surf wax and sunscreen by the pallet. More importantly, the people of Silverwood were smiling again at each other, at Logan, at their town. One morning, Logan's phone buzzed with a call from Duke. The Surfing Federation had reviewed the success of the event and wanted to make it official, an annual national qualifier, hosted right there on Logan's Lakeside property. "And we're not just talking banners and trophies," Duke had said. "We're talking partnership, funding for beach maintenance, legal protections, a permanent stake in something big." Logan didn't hesitate. He said yes. Together, they drafted contracts, filed permits, set up a nonprofit fund to funnel event proceeds into youth sports programs and conservation efforts for Silverwood Lake. And just like that, a war zone had become a cornerstone. The next year, the second annual festival tripled in size. Booths lined the shore with everything from handmade jewelry to gourmet tacos. Live music played from a raised stage nestled between 2 pine trees. News vans returned, this time not for scandal, but celebration. Even a few B-list celebrities showed up, posing for photos with fans and donating to the local fund. Logan walked through it all with a quiet kind of pride. He didn't need to speak much. People knew. Near the edge of the vendor circle, he spotted Mr. Jenkins sipping lemonade and laughing with a group of teenagers building a massive sandcastle. When Jenkins saw him, he raised his cup in salute. A silent nod passed between them that said, "We made it through." Later that evening, as the awards ceremony wrapped under a cotton candy sky, Duke called Logan up to the stage. The crowd clapped, cheered, even chanted his name. Duke handed him a small, engraved plaque. It read, "Logan Pierce, Defender of the Shore." The applause that followed wasn't just for Logan's victory over Karen. It was for everything he represented: resilience, creativity, and refusing to be bullied into silence. The festival ended with a bonfire. Locals, surfers, volunteers gathered on the sand, roasting marshmallows, telling stories, and laughing until the stars were the only light above them. Someone joked about Karen trying to sneak back and reclaim the lake. The group erupted into laughter, healing, unforgettable laughter. And Logan, he just smiled. Because this wasn't just about holding on anymore. It was about building something bigger than any clipboard ever could. The third year came quietly, no drama, no protests, no bulldozers roaring down the hill. Just the breeze off Silverwood Lake, the sparkle of morning sun on water, and the sound of quiet community kind forged not by rules or regulations, but by shared respect. Logan sat on his porch, sipping coffee as the first surfers carried their boards toward the lakeshore. He no longer braced for conflict. The scars from the whole war had long since faded into something else: strength. The beach, his beach, wasn't overrun or abused. It was appreciated. Locals now treated the shoreline like sacred ground. Families picnicked beneath the trees, always careful to leave it cleaner than they found it. Early risers jogged by with a wave and a smile. Couples strolled at dusk, their footsteps gentle along the waterline. And when someone new arrived in town, it was common to hear a neighbor say, "That's Logan's place. He saved this lake." The HOA had been reformed under Mr. Daniels, a retired firefighter who treated his job like a civic duty, not a power trip. The organization now operated with real transparency. Meetings were civil. Property rights were respected. They even asked Logan to sit on an advisory committee, but he politely declined. He didn't need a title. He had the legacy. As the annual festival rolled around once more, Logan helped set up from behind the scenes, hauling gear, helping kids register, checking on vendors. It wasn't about him anymore. It was about Silverwood. And it showed. The event was now tied to local charities, youth outreach programs, and conservation initiatives that kept the lake pristine. The surf competition had even been featured in a national magazine, from HOA Tyranny to Surf Sanctuary, Silverwood's remarkable rebirth. Karen, meanwhile, was long gone, or it had she moved to towns over, working an hourly job managing parking violations at a strip mall, a bitter irony no one missed. Occasionally, someone would bring her up, usually over a campfire at the festival's closing night. The jokes were softer now, less angry, more amused. Her name had become folklore: clipboard queen who lost the lake. That final night, Logan sat with Duke, Jenkins, and a few longtime locals around the fire. The stars shimmered over Silverwood like they always had. Someone asked, "Did you ever think it would end up like this?" Logan looked out over the sand, at the glowing fire pits, the quiet laughter, the distant sound of waves. "Not at first," he said, "but now, I can't imagine it any other way." Because what Karen tried to steal through force, Logan had defended with resolve, creativity, and sheer refusal to surrender. And in the process, he hadn't just protected what was his. He had reminded an entire town that dignity can't be voted away, that ownership doesn't make you selfish, and that the strongest communities are the ones built not on control, but on respect. As the fire crackled low and the last songs drifted into the night air, Logan closed his eyes and smiled. Silverwood was safe. The beach was alive. And no one would ever take it away again. Standing your ground doesn't make you selfish, it makes you a guardian of what's right. In a world where bullies often disguise themselves as community leaders and where power is too easily abused behind clipboards and bylaws, it's vital to remember that protecting your rights is not an act of greed, it's an act of courage. Logan didn't fight back with rage or revenge. He fought with creativity, resilience, and unwavering belief in the truth. And in doing so, he transformed conflict into community. Sometimes, the most powerful way to protect what's yours is to turn your defense into something